Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. In news this week, I think that of course the fall of Nyarja is very big news. I made a full video about that apparently a lot of people are interested in, and this could definitely change the face of trading and even of JITA itself quite substantially, as the impact on trade between MR and JITA will start to take shape. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, see how it all evolves, and it might even have to change the way I look at EVE Talk, or perhaps I should make like EVE Talks in the different trade hubs if those really do see a resurgence. We will see how it works. Some people are even speculating that JITA will be the final target for the Triglavians. That would be interesting, of course. Another thing that happened is that CCP released the metaliminal storms, and right off the bat Dital was hit by an electrical one, which is pretty interesting, of course. So the eye of the storm, you could say the center of the storm, will only be in nullsec, but it can bleed out several systems through the gate system in EVE Online, and as a result Dital actually got a strong electrical storm going, which had the nice side effect of spawning extra signatures, including relic sites, or very specifically a lot of relic sites that normally only spawn in nullsec, and can actually yield you a decent amount of ISK for the effort. So that was very interesting. On top of that, the storm itself gave a bonus to relic analyzers, and so that's basically the perfect mix for whoever wants to do a bit of exploration. So that was great to see. Next to that, we'll have to wait and see. I think CCP hasn't really released that much more on their plans, except that they are of course doing some more proving grounds as well at the moment. That means that we get to take a quick look at the new Eden store as well. Oh, there is actually a sale going on. Alright, I didn't expect it because last week we didn't see anything. Inner Zone Vanguard skin, that actually looks pretty good on the Brutix. Cyclone Snowline, Zento Isideko for the Drake, Ferox as well. Alright, ooh, and even a Gnosis Midnight skin. I don't have that. It's actually not that expensive and it looks pretty impressive actually. I don't think I have, except for the fully white one, I don't have that many special skins for the Gnosis. That's pretty enticing. Also not that expensive at only 38 plex at the moment. Might be something worth looking into. But yeah, there's some more Amar stuff as well, with Oasis of Faith skins, Skybreaker. Oh, that's a new one as well. The Blue Star Defender skins, 55. That also feels decently doable. More Inner Zone Vanguard stuff. Alright, well, there's quite a bit of sales going on, and I personally do like this Gnosis Midnight skin for only 38 plex. That actually looks pretty juicy for a ship that is basically flyable by everyone and anyone. And then we will move on to the market, of course. That's why everyone is here. We will start with some plex and stuff at 325. Like that, and as always, of course, we start with plex that is basically moving sideways. If we look at the chart with a slight edge upwards, but from last week average prices in JITA itself at least have gone down. But yeah, I'm actually starting to see a serious pullback or pull up from 2.5 million on the average prices today so far. Let's try to get that going. Almost 2.6 million for the average price on the chart. In JITA, 2.67 million almost for the sellers, above 2.5 million still for the buyers. And then if we go for the player owned trade hubs, a little bit more competition in the buyers, but very close in highest price. And then the sellers also just a bit above 2.6 million, so the margin is already very close, and yet in the Tranquility Trading Tower that margin is closing up even more as well. Although yeah, first sell order in JITA competing with them is coming in quite quickly, so that's pretty interesting. I personally don't think that Perimeter and JITA will come into play. Perimeter could happen, but I do personally think that that will be defended because of the presence of that Keepstar. And JITA itself, well, I still think that CCP is planning to do that full revamp of the JITA station, and that they don't plan to let that sort of go to waste by having the Triglavians come in and basically destroy access to the system. Although it would be very interesting, and it would be the ultimate expression, in my opinion, of the sandbox, to have Jita become Triglavian, and that would massively impact everything that I do at the moment for EveTalk and things like that. I personally think that CCP will have those special rules in place for Jita, which it already has for many other things. After that, our multiple pilot train certificate not following suit, so basically flat around 1.3 billion ISK here. First sellers coming in just a little bit below. No, first seller coming in at 1.284 billion, but most just above 1.3. That's including the Tranquility Trading Tower, and going up to almost 1.4 billion in Jita itself. Buyers, pretty nice margin actually, 1.1 billion, so that's actually still pretty damn decent. Volumes are slowly going down though, so at some point the price will have to move if the volumes want to make a bit of a comeback. After that, our skill extractors following the chart of Plex very closely, and in fact today's data point is slightly above 300 million ISK. We haven't seen that in a while, but the sellers are coming in at 298 million for most. That means that someone must have been grabbing from the sell orders in Jita at 313 million. That's a bit of a difference starting to show there, and the buyers are slowly forced up towards that 300 million mark at 296 now for the first buyer in Jita. Definitely some more competition coming in on the buy side of things, driving the price up slowly. So it could really be that this is the end of the summer, the bottom is forming, and that we're starting to see more activity, more demand, and thus an increase in price here. On the skill injector market, we finally also see the inflection point, so a bottom maybe 10 days ago, forming at 670 million ISK, and we start to move up a little bit from that. 690 million now for the sellers, still 660 for the buyers, so you're definitely still trying to buy this on the cheap, but know that the 5-day moving average is definitely moving up, and thus it's becoming harder and harder to grab a large skill injector from those cheap buy orders. The small skill injector, as expected at this point, is also moving in tandem, forming that same bottom just about 10 days ago at around less than 140 million ISK. Sellers are now coming in at 141, 146 in Jita, and 129 million for the buyers. So same story here. If you see these sellers and buyers and you get an average price that goes towards that 140, it means that next to no one is selling to these buy prices anymore, to these buy orders anymore, and the majority of the volumes are basically just being picked off from the sell orders themselves. Pretty aggressive, showing a bit more demand, showing also that late summer bottom potentially being formed. We never know, of course. Then we have our daily alpha injectors that are doing the exact opposite, really showing off that it is a completely different product. While the large and the small scale injectors were basically still going down and forming their bottom mid-August, here we actually had a rising price throughout most of the summer, went up to 40 million ISK, and now that the others are increasing in price, daily alpha injectors are dropping down. Sellers going down to 38 million, buyers down to 34 million ISK. And finally we get the hypercore. A first little move here as well, starting to move up just a little bit, and perhaps this could also be a sign that more activity, more stuff being bought from CCP. I've seen on the Reddit post that the numbers actually are pretty nice in the second quarter, for instance, for real life revenue in EVE Online. And what we can see here is perhaps also a bottom being formed in the hypercores, and a little bit more activity in Hypernet, really a bit more demand for these, starting to drive the price up. We are now up to 275 for a couple of sellers. Most are coming in at 290,000 ISK though, and almost 260,000 for the buyers. They have become a little bit more aggressive. Another small telltale sign, to me at least, that the summer is ending, and that despite the strange situation we find ourselves in real life, there was a decrease in activity in EVE Online that is now starting to basically pick back up as the summer is ending. Pretty interesting in my book. The war will have something to do with that as well, but despite despite the fact that I think CCP has been coming out with interesting content with the invasions, even just from following mostly from the sidelines, coming in here and there. Perhaps the fall of Nyarja and then the war that is still raging. I think there's like a first keep start has gone down and things like that. Interest is definitely starting to pick up, despite the fact that I'd see this as a very strong summer for EVE as well, because of course of the pandemic and things like that. But I'm seeing that as a first sign, and that would be very good, of course, for Plex and for my large and small scale injector investment that I have made as well. Let's move on to the minerals next at 1025. So you may already have seen from the ticker that Tritanium has done pretty damn well to pick back up here. I really thought that we would see a decrease in volatility and then just some slow bounces up from 7 ISK. But if we look here in JITA itself, sellers are up to 8.27 ISK, buyers are at 7.58, so a bit of a margin opening up here. Volumes definitely pretty low here, 25 million units, 150 million units, and then 300 million units at 8.3 ISK. That is definitely not that much for Tritanium, and so sellers are now up to well above 8 ISK, which is a very, very good price. If Mexalon is finally starting to show a bit of a decline from its really high prices, it could be that you might focus your shift a little bit from Mexalon to Tritanium. The combination of both is still bound to be your winning ticket, but this is something that I did not expect, to see the sellers of Tritanium shoot up to well above 8 ISK all of a sudden, driving that volatility back and increasing the average prices to almost 8 ISK so far today. That's pretty damn impressive. Pyrite is continuing its slow decline and now breaking through the 6 ISK mark. 6 ISK for the first seller, 610 for most, and then 553 for the buyers. This is of course pretty much the exact opposite of what you would expect in Tritanium. And someone actually said or mentioned that there are still moon mining activities that yield pyrite and that yield isogen, and that could be part of the reason, not just stocks that are lying around and that are still in need of sellers, but just really general moon mining activity that can still yield pyrite and isogen, and as a result we have this pressure on the price here, as that activity is still apparently being done quite a decent amount, despite the fact that the minerals that are yielded for Tech 2 stuff, the advanced minerals, definitely are not doing that well at the moment. I still think that there is a bit of speculation. I'm making that myself. It's part of the reason why my moon mining activities are still up and running. That CCP already mentioned in the dev blog that they were aware that they were probably over nerfing moon mining, and that they'll look into it in the future, specifically if they should not increase the need for the materials that are currently being produced in industry in general. And so right now, of course, moon mining is not a great money maker, but you're building up a stock of stuff that's very cheap at the moment. If CCP does finally implement a change to increase the need for those materials, you could be in for a very good time. And who knows, perhaps pyrite and isogen, if those are still really coming from moon mining as well, might be on the menu too for increased needs in industry. So this pullback might be a sign that there is indeed a bit too much supply out there at the moment, but who knows when CCP decides to turn that around. It could be for these minerals as well. Let's take a look at Mexalon then. That is finally starting to lose some of its feathers, but only very, very slowly, getting just below 90 ISK for its 5-day moving average. 91 ISK for the sellers, 87 ISK for the buyers. Still an incredible price, especially if you look at this 1-year chart. Over double from the bottom, almost double from where we started off last year. This is an incredible gain, of course, and definitely also your focus for mining Mexalon, Tritanium, two minerals that are selling at incredibly high prices. Even historically speaking, this is very, very good for Mexalon. Next up here we get Isogen, that is continuing its slow retreat from 25 ISK, trying to stabilize at the tail end here, so not willing to just jump straight down to less than 20, but also a sign that there may be too much supply here. 23.69 for the sellers and 23.11 for the buyers. A couple of sellers at 90 million. That actually feels like this is slowly starting to slow down. I'll take a quick look at volumes for Pyrite, 150 and 40 million, 40 million. This also to me, does start to feel like it is slowing down. We saw, in my opinion, a couple of weeks ago, much bigger sell orders come in for Isogen and for Pyrite. So we may be stalling on that, and perhaps part of the equation, we never know the full picture, of course. The sandbox is way too large and way too complex for that, but part of the equation may of course still be some stocks that are lying around, of course. Isogen and Pyrite are the two minerals that have basically crashed in price the most during the resource bonanza because it was so massively overproduced, and as a result, I don't think it is completely unreasonable to suspect that there are still people out there that are holding very big amounts of these minerals that just have never even found the chance to be used in industry or anything like that, because they were becoming so ubiquitous, so easy to mine compared to the needs of the industry, which is the reason why the prices crashed to such crazy prices. Isogen used to be more expensive than Mexilon. Keep something like that in mind. We must be talking about crazy numbers to have that mineral then drop to less than 15 ISK when Mexilon's bottom was 40 ISK, like about a third of the price of something that it used to be more expensive as then. So that should really be a sign, in my opinion, that was just so massively oversupplied that it crashed the price to crazy numbers, and there must still be stocks of that lying around. Pyrite is basically in the same boat. It's now going for a 6 ISK. Pyrite should or used to be more expensive than titanium, and so that reverse is also, in my opinion, a reason to speculate that there was just way too much of it out there, and so there's bound to still be stocks of it out there. The ones that might know this would of course be CCP. After that, we've got Noxium, that was actually doing really good and continuing to build. All right, well, there are definitely two different sides to the story of minerals that are starting to form here. We get some big winners, so far Tritanium, Mexilon, and here is Noxium. And then we get a couple of losers, that is still Isogen and still Pyrite. So start the year at 300 ISK, a bottom of 200, then very much at the tail end of the resource spikes for most of the other ones. Here is Noxium going up to 500 ISK and now moving its way up to 600 ISK apparently, 688 in fact for the sellers and 610 ISK for the buyers. Definitely pretty damn good on increased volume, so there must have been more purchasing happening here. 1 year high point and more than double the price that we started off last year at, and almost or more than triple the price of the bottom that we have reached this year. That is of course very good news for people that would like to mine. It gives you another target to hunt for when Mexilon and Tritanium are not that available anymore. Noxium, very impressive, and in my book rather unexpected performance right here. After that, we've got Zydrine, that is, well, losing some of the gains, but let's keep that in mind. That it's still pretty damn relative. Start the year at 500, bottom, what is this, 400 ISK, and we're still above 1000 ISK. So Zydrine able to defend that price range, 1090 for the sellers and 966 for the buyers. Bit of a margin opening up here. We gotta be a little bit careful that this downtrend doesn't continue too much, but the big difference of course is that Zydrine no longer is supplied by moon miners in HiSec, and so you do have this bit more of a monopoly position of people importing Zydrine. They can basically dictate the price a lot more, and they're definitely doing what is needed to keep it above 1000 ISK, which is pretty impressive. Also double the price from early last year, so pretty damn nice. And then we have our loser in the former or current Nullsic minerals. Here is Megasite continuing its agonizing downtrend. Started the year at 400 ISK. It did manage to gain 50% in May, but now it just continues to go back down here. We're talking 480 ISK for the sellers, 465 for the buyers, much narrower margin, but of course it's that same reverse situation. Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine, now it's costing less than half, which is an indication. I don't think that it stocks for Megasite. It's a little bit too rare, and I personally don't feel like the decrease to 400 disk was that much crazier than the decrease for Zydrine to 500 disk, and if that one can make this kind of a comeback, to me it means that unlike for Isogen and Pyrite, the main bulk of the reason we have this decline in price is that supplies are still available in easy ways, and that is driving the price down. It could be the Income Fortresses and the invasion stuff that is definitely yielding some interesting mining opportunities, but I'm not 100% sure of this because of course I don't have all the numbers, but this is definitely a big difference. So you've got Megasite, Isogen and Pyrite that are declining in price, and then you've got Zydrine able to really maintain its 100% increase in price, Noxium going even higher, and Mexalon also great price, Titanium shooting back up here as well. Definitely two sides to every coin here, and the main thing that I do want to mention again here, Isogen used to be more expensive than Mexalon, it's now a fraction of the price. Pyrite used to be more expensive than Titanium, it's still below that price. For the two cheapest minerals to have this inversion is pretty weird as well. And then we've got same thing with Megasite and Zydrine. Megasite used to be like perhaps 10-20% more expensive than Zydrine, and now it's worth half the price. So there's definitely still some things that are happening in the mineral market, and that might be an indication that CCP, if they want to bring that formula back, that they need to change the needs in some of the industry in EVE Online at the moment, but perhaps they're pretty happy with that. Honestly, Zydrine is also a pretty rare mineral to grab, so there's no guarantee that this will turn around, but it could be an opportunity, of course. Historically speaking, this is still a very weird spot. After that, we have PI. Let's take a look at that from 2110. And basically here I'm waiting for the plex bottom to start to show the increase in activity, which should increase demand in PI as well. The loss of a keep star may be helping here, so let's see if there is a turnaround to be noted here. Nope, definitely not. Broadcast notes, this is really counter to my expectation. 1 year low point, breaking through the 1.75 million barrier. That feels kind of crazy. 1.73 million for the sellers, 1.663, so less than 1.7 million for the buyers of broadcast notes. Very pronounced 1 year low point on the chart, and apparently people are still dumping to these buyers as well, because we are seeing 1.63 average for a couple of days here. Very strange. I did not expect this, but another one where you'd think 1.8 below 1.9, that could be a bottom. Let's buy. Nope, you're too early. 1.75 million, we went below that almost twice. Here we go, we should have gotten our good purchases. No, market keeps tanking. Less than 1.7 by quite a little bit for broadcast notes. Another 1 year low point in the making. Looks really interesting. It is the end of the summer, but of course this does start to feel like a risky business to make your move in. Construction blocks next. That one is actually managing to pull back towards 10,000 ISK on average. 11,400 for the sellers, 9,000 ISK for the buyers. So it is a pretty big margin opening up. Buyers are still very patient, staying at 9,000 ISK, but the sellers are driving the price up to 11k, probably on a little bit less supply here. So I'm reading this. If you look in the last 24 hours, nothing. 86, 85 for a couple here. Something that we don't see that often, in my opinion, in EVE Online, but we actually do seem to have a supply response when it comes to construction blocks. They're saying, no, this is too low, we're just not bringing it to the market anymore. Which is what I'm doing as well. It could be bad news if everyone is hoarding lots of stuff and we still have major stocks that are building in order to create these small comebacks, not even to average prices, although on this 1 year chart it looks average. 11,500 I think is a normal price for construction blocks. This is interesting that we see a supply response to this maintained below average price situation. Let's see if we got something similar in consumer electronics. No, this one is having to lose all its gains and is now moving well below 10,000 ISK. 9,500 for the sellers and 9,500 for the buyers. Should probably include Tranquility Trading Tower, although it's not that significant on the consumer electronics side of things. But what I do notice here, 35, 50, less than 1,000, 25, another 690 here. So it is supply in the last 24 hours, half the page, that's driving this price down from 10k to 9,700, 9,500 even for the first seller. But the numbers are definitely quite down in volumes compared to the buy orders, 50,000, 36,000, 12,000. This is pretty low, so this could just be a bit of a bumpy ride, but also a sign that actually usage of the material does seem to be down. If like a couple thousand, the consumer electronics can crash the price back down from 12k to less than 10,000 on average. The coolants tied to fuels are still struggling, but at least they're not forming another one-year low point, less than 9,000 disk, I think, on the chart here. Sellers, yeah, this is annoying, of course. Couple days, a couple jumps out, you've got some at 7,500, which someone should definitely pick up here. 9,500 for most sellers, 8,500 for the buyers. Pretty damn cheap coolants on this one-year chart, of course. Cryoprotectant solutions are not doing what I had kind of hoped it would do. It basically has a declined price back to its 1 year or back to the start of the year, and then this full bubble here that you could say, or this increase in price that was not able to be maintained, was due to new implants coming to the game. And so I was kind of hoping that we would overshoot in supply, but people are apparently very much aware that cryoprotectant solutions below 100,000 disk would be a very good deal. And so you know, quite a bit of competition. 102,000 for most seller, for the first seller 108,000 for most, and then at 99,000 the buyers are ready to grab any cryoprotectant solutions below that price. I'd kind of hope that we would overshoot that and I would maybe get to like below 95,000, perhaps even below 90,000 on the buyers, but that's not happening. Yeah, people are ready apparently to snag whatever is below 100,000 disk for cryoprotectant solutions. I can understand that, honestly. The potential is there for eventually to have a new implant set for Vorton projectors, and then of course 100,000, 200,000, 250 is possible on that introduction. As a result, it makes sense to make these investments. Enriched uranium also continuing to struggle, at least we're not continuing to go down, so back up a little bit from 10,000 disk, 10,700 for the sellers, 10,000 for the first few buyers, but clearly still below average and not really any signs that we are making a comeback. Integrity response drones flat for pretty much the whole week at its 1 year low point. 1.7 million almost for the sellers, a bit above 1.6 million for the buyers. If you still want these advanced PI materials, of course, broadcast nodes 1 year low point, integrity response zones flat on a 1 year low point. So these are still opportunities to grab relatively cheap ones, but you never know when another leg down is in the making, of course. Mechanical parts, all right, the one tied to fuels that's actually doing pretty damn well. Almost 11,000 for the sellers. I would say that that's slightly above average. 9,800 for the buyers is still a bit below average, but in general this does mean that we have decently normal prices for mechanical parts, despite the fact that we don't see that much demand. Last 24 hours, just a couple of sellers actually going for almost 11,000. So it's again, any resurgence does seem to be a supply response, not a demand response, because that is still pretty damn low. Next up here we've got the nanites that are stable at their current range, you could say as well. 6,300 for most sellers. Someone is going in at 5,249, definitely desperate for that sale, because 5,248 is the first buy order, so you could have just as well dumped it to that buy order in my opinion. But alright, nanites flat here on this 1 year chart. It looks pretty close to the average, probably a bit below average as well. Nano factories also flat at its really low range, 870,000 for the sellers, below 800,000 ISK for the buyers. Normal price at least 1 million ISK in my opinion. Organic mortar applicators, another advanced PI materials, 1 year low point, couple of averages here getting close to that 700,000 ISK. We're talking 800,000 for the sellers and 733 for the buyers. Also, you know, on this 1 year chart, definitely really cheap. Recursive computing module for the advanced PI materials, actually able to defend its 1.5 million bounce from the 1 year low point here. So that's still definitely pretty cheap and below average, coming in at a little bit less than 1.6 million in the Tranquility Trading Tower, a bit above that in Jita, and then buyers are just above 1.5 million. Not as juicy as some of the other advanced PI material charts, but still decently low, I would say. Robotics crashing back down. This is really bad news. Because of course this is tied to fuels. This is something that normally sees quite a little bit of consumption that should maintain the price, but yeah, here we had 100,000 is, I would say, normal, perhaps just below that. We were driven down to 90k, tried to research, back to 90k, and then this basically broke us. 85,000. We moved here for a while and it looked like we tried to get back and look at that response. This is the overshot that I was talking about, that I was kind of hoping to see in cryoprotectant solutions. Unfortunately, it's in robotics, and now we just break through that 85,000, and in fact we're below 80,000 on a couple of days for the average price. 82,000 for the sellers and 79,000 for the buyers. 1 year low point. Very cheap robotics right now, at least 20% below its normal average price. Self-harmonizing power cores also able to stay away from the bottom, but very careful not to get anywhere close to the average price here. 1.75 million for the sellers, below 1.7 million for the buyers. Sterile conduits also clearly struggling to maintain its bounce. Went up to 1.1 million, is back below 1 million for the average prices. Even a couple of sellers in the Tranquility Trading Tower, less than 900,000 disk for the buyers. Yukomi superconductors flat at their current range, 73,000. So this one probably also tied to, if you look at this pattern and compare that to these cryoprotectant solutions, bound to be tied to implant production as well, and still able to basically maintain a slight margin as well over the start of the year. Below 50,000 seems to be of interest to the buyers, and in fact buyers are still at 66,000, so some slightly more aggressive buying in the Yukomi superconductors. And finally, the wetware mainframes that also bounce back from less than 1.5 million, that's really low, to 1.75, but really struggling to maintain these gains. Below 1.7 million for the first couple of buyers now, and below 1.6 million for first couple of sellers, excuse me, and for the first buyers below 1.6 million by quite a bit. In fact, more pressure. The PI market is not showing that same bottom, which I am starting to see in the plex stuff. So perhaps a little bit worrying, but we will see how things evolve, of course. Next up, advanced wood materials, 3150. First, a bit of water. And let's get started here. Does the war potentially do something here? It could, but let's see what happens first here. Crystalline carbonate. This is interesting. We do have a massive volume spike right as we reach a 1 year low point of 125 on average, and we've driven the price back up, but 140 for the sellers, 115 to 116 still for the buyers. This feels more like an investment than something due to the Nulsic war right here. Someone made a move on the cheapest crystalline carbonates. That's his volume spike, but has kept it well below average again for how high the bounce would go. Fermionic condensates, a bit of volumes that are actually driving the price back down. This one was, of course, on this 1 year chart doing okay to maintain 90,000 discs, so that should be a bit of supply, driving the price down to 86,700, almost 87,000 for the sellers, 79,000 disc for the buyers. So we're pulling away from that 90,000 disc on some fresh supply. Again, this is more a market response in this segment, not a lot of winners, and so fermionic condensates that was able to maintain 90,000 disc actually feels like something you should bring to the market and try to sell. Ferrite carbide for the Minmatar production line had this big spike at the start of the war, of course, went down to a 1 year low point of 125. Volume response a tiny little bit, but not that much, so also a tiny little bounce for ferrite carbide. 132 for the sellers, 129 for the buyers. Super narrow margin, but at a very cheap price, definitely below average. Ferrogel continuing to go down in price away from that 40,000 disc mark. Not able to defend that. Yeah, too bad. 37,000 for the sellers, 35,000 for the buyers. Just a bit of supply, right, is driving the price back down quite sharply. Fullerite's same story now, going straight through that 1,000 disc. You know, you could kind of have hoped that we would be able to defend that being above 1,000 disc for quite a little bit, but to no avail. 940 is for now for the sellers, 850 for the first buyer, going down to 825 very quickly. Let's see if we can get something like that to show on the chart. Yeah, below 850 is already below the entire chart, and like this you can clearly see the momentum of this downtrend that's only increasing. Fullerites could be in for a buy opportunity if this keeps up, in my opinion. Hypersynaptic fibers, okay, one of the few apparently that is going back up in price a little bit. Almost 12,000 for the sellers, decent supply in the last 24 hours. 11,000 disc for the buyers as well. So increased volumes, increased prices should show a little bit of extra demand apparently for hypersynaptic fibers, not from a pronounced 1-year low point. So this is actually a decently impressive bounce, showing a bit more interest, I think, in these fibers. Our nano transistors are flat at 5,000 disc here, flat at the low range, just a little bit too much supply, driving the price down. Buyers at 4,900, closing the gap basically. If this supply dries up, we could be back for a period at 6K. This seems to really have been the situation for nano transistors. Lack of supply, 6,000 for the sellers. Whoever still manages to bring it in is able to sell at that price. Bit more supply comes in, we crash back down, 5,000 as the bottom range, and that's where we're at right now. Non-linear metamaterials, oof, definitely overshooting, tied to Caldari. And the 5D moving average going to a 1-year low point here. 20,000 for the first seller, 21,000 for most, and below 20,000 for the buyers. Actually already a response apparently, because you would expect seeing an average price of like 18,000 disc to still show up in here, but I guess that we're already too late for that bottom. The best prices have been picked up, although it's not visible on the chart just yet. A bit unfortunate. Phenolic composites bouncing from its 1-year low point, not even that special in the volumes, but at least a couple of days of higher prices. And again, very, very shy, nowhere near the 2000 disc average. You could see for the year 1800 for the buyers, 1600 for the sellers, 1600 for the buyers. Photonics, let's take a look at that. Photonic metamaterials, flat below average. We're going to speed through this a little bit more unless we find something really interesting. Plasmonic metamaterials for the Minmatar, so we had that spike for the war, and also basically we're being driven close to 1-year low points. We're not there yet, but it's not doing that great, and no signs of any real bounces. Ceramic fibers back above 350. Pretty shy in its increase as well. Terahertz metamaterials for Mars ships reached a 1-year low point, slight increase in volumes, slight bounce as well. It's that same story again. Buyers do come in to pick up the 1-year low points, but they just, you know, grab the very cheapest stuff, and they're not willing to go a lot higher. Titanium carbide, yeah, below average, bit of pressure at the tail end, but at least it's not a 1-year low point. And then tungsten carbide was at its low point again, or very close to that. Bit of a bounce again, but super shy, right? 200 disc, well, we're definitely far away from that. 170 for most sellers, and 160 for the buyers. So advanced materials definitely struggling at the moment. A little bit of volatility here and there, some 1-year low points, couple of slight comebacks, but everything is very shy, definitely staying under normal activity, you could say. Let's move on to the Tech 2 ships then. 38 minutes. Like that, and let's see if we find something interesting here. We do see some pressure, and then you would expect pressure on the Tech 2 ship prices, and yet the Basilisk back well above 200 million ISK here. 213 for the sellers, 194 for the buyers. So I'm still trying to grab that one Basilisk at 175. That is apparently not happening. It's not a lot of volatility, unfortunately, but I think if you bought at the bottom prices and now you're able to sell for 210, something like that, you've got a little bit of a profit to be made here. So this is, to me, a surprise bounce for the Basilisk, or an early bounce for the Basilisk. I thought perhaps we'd have a bit more momentum, but buyers not diving well below 190 or anything like that. The Cerberus that was able to maintain its price above 230 million, doing the exact opposite, going back down below that. But keep in mind, bottoms on the chart are close to 200 million, and I've bought Cerberi for like 185 and below. Right now 217 million still for the sellers, 190 million, bit below that for the buyers. Already a pretty nice spread, but yeah, keep in mind again, if this has any momentum, then you could touch 200 million on the chart. You could go well below 185 for the buyers. That's where I would make my move. So I would say a little bit early, but a sign that we're seeing different activities also in the Tech 2 ship market. Half a page, 10 ships here. It's not that much, so we do need a bit of extra supply, which could, I think, happen with these cheap advanced move materials. But perhaps Nullsec is keeping things in check, using a lot of ships themselves at the moment. So it's difficult to time it at the moment for the Tech 2 market. I'll keep an eye on the Cerberus though. Next up here we get the Guardian, flat at 200 million ISK, actually up a little bit for the week as well. 202 million for the sellers, 185 million for the buyers. Decent spreads, decent place for the buy orders. I still have my one Guardian at 184, so it's your decision to make, but we're not at the lowest possible price either. Now here it could become a bit more interesting. Here is the Hound. That one went to less than 25 million, went up to 35 million. Bit of bouncy behavior here, but now it does look like we are shooting back down quite substantially. Sellers are down to 25 million, and we get 400 units here as well. Buyers are at 23.3 million. Still a bit too much for me, but get rid of these three buy orders. Try to buy below 22 million, and that could be a nice place to try and buy these at. And I think it is possible that that will happen with another 400 units available at the cheapest price here. That is going to continue this pressure, so look out for another buy opportunity in the Hounds. In my opinion, get rid of these three and then we're at it. That's where you should try to make your move. Igitursa for one eye on the Triglavian ships, flat at 400 million, not much to say here. And then the Ishtar, which I of course use as a gauge for general interest and prices, because I feel like it's a versatile ship that finds its use everywhere. So there's demand for PvE, demand for PvP. Everyone loves to have an Ishtar, I think, ready and able to go back above 230 million is not that bad. 231 for the sellers, 205 million for the buyers, so that's a decent margin between those two, but we're at the low end of its average, but it's still a decent sell price for the Ishtar. After that we've got the Manticore, also going down in price, not as quickly as what we would like to see, such as what we're seeing here with the Hound, but we are seeing some more pressure. Bottom of the chart touching 25 million, 27 million for the sellers, almost 28 for most actually, and then less than 25 million for the buyers. Same story, 244 units here, 31 units here. It's, in my opinion, a little bit too early. Try to get below that 24 million or something like that, I think, for the Manticore, but definitely something to look at and to closely follow, because those massive supply numbers, of course, should keep any spike from happening. And the right timing is probably as that starts to dwindle, and as those buy orders are potentially forming that bottom. You know, you get quite a few more above 24 million, then we're below 23, and then it's not that much that's left anymore. So yeah, all right. In my opinion, a bit too early. I could be wrong on that, but definitely very interesting again in the stealth bombers. The Munin had that same spike during the war, a dive down to 200 million, and then a very shy bounce, and we're already going back down apparently. 202 million for the sellers, 180 million for the buyers. That does look interesting. If you don't have a cheap Munin lying around, try to buy as close as possible to 180 million. You can see the potential, 250 pretty easily. And on some more Imperium activity, you could see a crazy spike. I would not blame anyone for trying to grab a Munin at around 180 million. You can see not a lot of interest in general here, so just have that one investment ready. I would say this is the right time to do so. Then another stealth bomber, which I personally really like. Here is the Nemesis, went up to 30 million on the spike as well, and is now diving straight down to 22.5 million. Not yet the 1 year low point on the chart, but it's probably starting to look pretty interesting. 23 million for the sellers, 21.6 million for the buyers. Still 153 here as well, although that feels like it's well away from the 300, etc. from the hounds, and we could be close to the bottom for the Nemesis. You're buying well below 22 million ISK. If we look for that on the chart, let's see if I can get to 22 million. Definitely a low point for like the last 6-7 months or so. And we would need a lot of supply to reach that 1 year low point of 20 million here again on the chart. This one also, you know, again, perhaps we're a little bit early, but worth keeping a close eye on because this is a pretty big pullback in the price, and there is still quite a bit of supply left to keep this in check and to put more pressure on that as well. Next up here we've got the Oneros that is you know, still struggling at its low end of the range as well, but you know, I've already mentioned that buyers 153 million. If you want that one Oneros just like you might want that one Munin, you know, it makes sense to try to grab it, but it's been in this state for like almost 2 months at this point. Then our Panther flat above 1.1 billion, showing in my opinion that the production costs of Tech 2 are not really falling off a cliff or anything like that. 1.2 billion for the sellers and a bit below 1.1 billion for the buyers. And then our next stealth bomber, the Purifier. Here we're already a little bit too late, so we went down to 25 million and we actually have a slight bounce up from that. 27 million for the sellers, but there's 300 units though. That is interesting. 22.6 million for the buyers. Can we work our way below that? That will be very difficult, but it could happen. This is a bit of a surprise. We have another either a relisting or a massive amount of supply coming in at the cheapest price. Basically a bit of desperation to get rid of a lot of these stealth bombers, and so these buyers, they might just get filled below 23 million, 22.5. That's super close to the 1 year low point. Yeah, if you want to start your investment now, 30 million easy, 35 million potentially for the Purifier, and you're buying them close to 22.5 million. I would that makes sense to me, although there's still a bit of supply. Potentially we could again see a better opportunity later down the line, just like in all the stealth bombers. Very interesting. And yeah, you guys might know, but the latest very successful trades that I've made is on the cheap hounds, sold it for a nice profit, and I think I did the same with the Purifier as well. So not at the best place for the Purifier, I think a little bit less pronounced profit because of this flatness here, but it's very doable, and it looks like we're very close to buy opportunities in these stealth bombers again. Next up, the Scimitar, bouncing off of that 200 million range. Let's see where the buyers are at. 193. Yes, no, too early, I think. Honestly, you can probably at some point grab Scimitars below 190 pretty easily. Then we've got our Widow, another stealth bomber. Ooh, that's not such good news, right? Definitely breaking down towards 1 billion on the average price. Volumes up a little bit, up to 10 ISK, so that should see a lot more supply coming in. Last 24 hours we got quite a few, bring the price down to close to 1.1 billion. Couple of buyers at 1 billion. This is a sharp drop off. This is not good news for people that are looking for basically good prices in Tech 2 ships and decent margins. This is a first sign that people are making these ships on the cheap and that they're willing to dump them at lower prices. That does create buy opportunities potentially. Right now, basically, if you want a Widow, try to buy it as close as possible to 1 billion ISK. Look at these average prices, you're probably able to get it. So that is the good news on that front, of course. And then finally we've got the Zealot, which I did make an investment in, but probably too early on this one again, starting to hover below 200 million ISK and still seeing a lot of pressure. Less than 190 million for the sellers, 182 million for the buyers. But what we're not seeing, which was present in all these stealth bombers are the big volumes, of course. So the purchase of a couple dozen ships could bring us back up to 200 million on the sell prices, and then who knows how quickly we can go back up. I'm basically ready with my one zealot. I'm not gonna invest in even more of them, but the Munin could be interesting. I don't have that. I still don't have an Oneros because of the terrible volumes, but it does make sense if you want to be ready across the board. Scimitar was too early. So yeah, Munin is potentially something that I could try to buy at the current market. Then our Tech 3 ships coming in at 49 minutes. Let's take a look at that. As always, we start with the destroyers. Here's the Confessor. Okay, up to 70 million, perhaps even more. 1 year high point. That is, of course, bound to be due to the war. 66 million for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers. Last 24 hours, a bit of supply driving the price down from 70 million ISK. Another massive spike in the Confessor, not what I had predicted, obviously. This is coming out of the blue, so more disruption in what I would have called a normal market. And I think last week I said try to buy some Jackdaws. I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's see, this is bound to have an impact on the other ships as well. So if last week you managed to buy Jackdaws, I think it was like 35 million or below, that could be you know, prime for taking advantage of whatever this spike is going to do throughout the market. The Hecate is slowly going back down from 50 million ISK, and this was one of the reasons why I said you should look into that, because the Hecate, of course, was bound to still absorb a lot of supply. It's still struggling. It's not that much in the last 24 hours, and now, of course, the Confessor is going to have to be supplied as well to plug this gap. So we should really see a drop-off in supply in the Jackdaw, and so the Hecate going slowly down below 50 million ISK. Buyers are at 43 million. And let's take a look at what the Jackdaw is doing. Continuing to go down, and this is very surprising. 40 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers. Bit of competition coming in here. I think we were lower than that. I think we were at these buy orders last week. Yeah, look at that. This is, well, actually 36 million. But this would make sense. I would definitely be willing to put up a buy order here for the Jackdaw. Try to grab it as much below 40 million as possible. As of course, Confessor is up to like 60 million. Hecate is still at 50 million. Should drive a lot of the supply here in the last 24 hours. Yeah, a couple of ships, but not that many anymore. 16 of them at 40 million is probably what is still putting that pressure on the price down here. And I'm reading this as a pretty pronounced buy opportunity for the Jackdaw. If these markets do respond normally, we should see sustained needed supply for the Confessor. We still need supply for the Hecate to close that gap. Who the hell is gonna sell and build Jackdaws at 40 million when you've got Hecates at 50 and Confessor at 60 plus? I don't know. Perhaps there are still some people out there that are doing that, but we should see that shift. We should see that dry up of supply in the Jackdaw. This should really be a bottom that is forming. Same thing in the Zweipel. Zweipel is slowly already moving its way back up to 40 million ISK as well, on not that much supply anymore. So a couple of sellers 7 jumps away, but most are at 40 million. Buyers are still at 35 million. I would say the Jackdaw is in a much better spot because of this, but yeah, Zweipel also working its way back to the Jackdaw price already, which should be another sign in my opinion. Zweipel far less popular than the Jackdaw, so yeah, Jackdaw primed for try to buy this stuff as cheaply as possible, as close as possible to 36 million. This ought to be a big opportunity. Next up here we have the cruisers. Here's the Legion, still struggling to go anywhere, staying below 140 million on the chart. 141 for the sellers, 127 million for the buyers, still very cheap. Loki actually going close to 1 year low point, breaking down to less than 150 million, 145 million for the sellers, 132 for the buyers. Also, you know, there's not that much to say here, very cheap on, I don't know, what is this, 30, 40 ships, and it's still coming, right? All of this is still coming in the last week or so, below 150 million. It's not that big in volume, so this could be turned over very quickly. But right now, despite these 1 year low prices or very close to it, still supplied, still every day ships coming in. Kind of crazy. Proteus also finally also seeing the pressure. I shouldn't say finally, definitely seeing the pressure here, heading back towards that low point as well. Yep, sellers below 130 million, buyers are at 120. And then we've got our Tengu. What's that one doing? Seeing more pressure as well. Sellers below 150, buyers at 133. Honestly, I'm happy where I'm at. I think that Legion and Loki are the most popular ones with the highest potential upside. But if you're looking for those Tech 3 investments, the Proteus now, sellers below 130, that's below the entire chart, buyers next to none of them below 121. It would make sense to also try to grab one Proteus. In my opinion, you could risk bigger investments. That would not be how I would go about it, because I feel like a lot of this is bound to be manipulation, very, very unpredictable. But clearly, Proteus also at a 1 year low point for the buyers. Let's see if we can get like 120. That's all the way down here. I have my Legion, I have my Loki. I could perhaps try to grab a Proteus as well. For the Tengu, I'd wait a little bit longer. How close to 130 are we? Yeah, a bit above that. I'd wait for these 130 pluses to perhaps be gone, then buy substantially below 130. That would make sense as well. But keep in mind, all of this is done on not that many ships, especially if you compare like the sell orders here. All of this is what, maybe 100 chips or so, not even that. And the average trade volumes is 100 chips. So that's really weird to see such low supplies on the market. Still see these low, super low prices. Still see that pressure. Still see these trade volumes, and then just the ships aren't there, which for me makes it feel very weird. Look at this front page here. What would that be? 30 ships, maybe 30 ships to make the full front page here, and that's about the average of what should be traded every single day here as well. So it feels very weird in the Tech 3 ship market, but buying one on the very cheapest right now, that would be the Proteus, it could still make sense. I would never risk more than one though. And then for the extra product this week, coming in at 55.45. I'm going to take a quick look at the fuels. Fuel blocks are of importance to me because, of course, I actually consume quite a little bit of those for all of the services, and right now they're pretty damn low. Actually, for the second time on the helium fuel blocks, we are hitting that 1 year low point of around 17,000 ISK. 17,200 for the sellers, 16,500 for the buyers. Look at this 1 year chart. Definitely very cheap fuel at the moment. Cheap PI last week, we saw that the isotopes were recovering from the war spikes, and so we get that pressure building again on the helium fuel blocks, for instance, 1 year low point. Hydrogen fuel blocks not yet at that 1 year low point, but also touching 17,000 ISK. In fact, first sellers coming below that. Buyers are below 16,000 ISK. That's some pretty cheap fuel as well. Then we have our nitrogen fuel blocks that are also breaking through that 17,000 ISK barrier by quite a bit of supply, actually. 16,700. Buyers are at 15,700. And then our oxygen fuel blocks should show a similar pattern, of course. Yep, they are. We are talking 16,900 as well. A bit more aggressive buying up here, but getting close to 15,000 and below very, very quickly. So this is bound to be another time for me to... This would have been another time for me to do quite a few active trade runs to try and grab some of that cheap fuel and bring that back to the Tal. But of course, that is now like 44 jumps away. So I'm actually looking into local production for myself. One jump out in Dira. There is ice. I think we should be able to find all the planets needed for some fuel production as well for the PI side of things. It's something that I'm playing with now. Or I would also have to do a comparison with the prices in Amar, for instance. That's gonna be interesting, of course. The new trade situation for the Tal means that we're quite a bit more isolated for Jita, and so it's not as easy now for me to take advantage, for instance, of these super cheap fuel prices. We'll see. It's a sandbox. It's all about adapting, trying to find the best deals, and doing what you enjoy, of course. And I kind of enjoy the idea of being a bit more at the tail end of of the universe, to see if we can't build up there, if we can't help the Amar rise, and perhaps Minmatar as well, to basically increase activity there. We'll see what happens. It is going to be interesting for sure, but there's just no way, it's too bulky, there's no way for me to transport fuel blocks through Niarja at this time, so I can't really take advantage of these very cheap fuel block prices, at least not the ones from Jeddah. We'll see how it works out, but clearly 1 year low points on almost all of the fuel blocks. And that's gonna be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.